for not knowing that they lived in the dirt. His eyes focused on a particular group of 5 orphans. They were the strongest of the orphan factions because they were the oldest and therefore the biggest. And since they were the biggest, they were the most likely to get food, to keep themselves big. From the looks of them, Wick guessed most were about 8 or 9 years old. So, a year or 2 younger than him. They were ahead of him on the street, only about 10 paces away. Wick was certain they didn't know he was there. The group's leader was a girl with pale green hair the color of seaweed. That means she has some nymph blood in her, Wick thought. Pale green means either her mother or father was one of the Mar, the Oceanids. While most of the other orphans' eyes flicked nervously across the street like a flock of birds looking for the first worm, hers were steady and wide, taking in the entire scene all at once. A month earlier, Wick heard one of the orphans call her Pebbles. It clearly wasn't her real name, but it was what she was called. None of the orphans shared something as intimate as their real names. Or maybe she was forced to choose a name, since her parents weren't around. 3 large boys, all with steel-gray hair of various lengths, stood behind her. Each were bigger than both Wick and Pebbles, but they were clearly waiting for the girl's signal. She nodded to the 5th and final member of their group, who Wick guessed was her younger brother. He too had green hair, though more forest green than her pale seaweed. Unlike the other 4 in his group, he was diminutive and frail. His limbs were thin, and he didn't walk much. The small boy acted as the group's scout. It's some sort of chronic illness, Wick concluded, without much compassion. It reminds me of how the older Sprawlers looked when they dove too deep in the dungeons, exposing themselves to noxious gases tripped from traps or lingering diseases from the rotten corpses of monsters that seeped in their bones and thinned their breaths. Wick didn't feel any sort of connection with the other orphans of the city. It wasn't because he had been around the country and seen things they hadn't. It was because he simply didn't have room in his heart to care. All he wanted was to get out of Outlast and join the Sprawlers Guild, like his father before him. Of course, portaling the wormhole to a city with a guild would require more money than he had. Much more. After that, he could figure things out while making money as a sprawler, dungeoneering the mines. He didn't know how yet, but Wick would make more money than his dad. Maybe he'd be able to afford to go to the Skillia before he turned 16 and enter his mandatory military service as an officer, rather than a grunt. Maybe, if his dad had that kind of money, he could have afforded high-tiered equipment before entering the labyrinth. Then, he might be still alive. Either way, Wick needed to get that money first, for the wormhole. Then, he'd use the wormhole to get far away from Outlast. To do that, he needed Pebble's crew to carry out their clumsy plan. Of course, it was a risk. Wick had kept himself far from the watchful gazes of the other orphans for 6 months, which had been a hard thing to do. They had been nervous about his presence at first, maybe even tried to recruit him, but he turned them down. Except for his father, people couldn't be trusted. The only thing you could trust was the sharpness of your mind and the weight of good coin. Money kept you fed. Money kept you warm. And if his dad had more of it, money would have kept him alive. A sailor Wick hadn't seen before walked by the alley. It looked like the guy hadn't noticed Wick was tucked neatly under one of the canopy shadows. This was the moment. Wick would be making himself known in a way he wasn't completely comfortable, but the risk would be worth it. "The strong live long," Wick muttered under his breath, the words giving him strength. "But the bold get the gold." At the sight of the man, Pebble's younger brother made a silent coughing motion, which acted as an awkward signal. The girl nodded to the 3 shaggy, gray-haired boys behind her. She held a knife in a reverse grip, ready for a slashing motion. One of the boys bumped into the sailor, jostling the young man's purse tied to his...